after about a century and a half of this warmth with the concomitant wealth that came along, European society was wealthy enough to undertake this extraordinary cathedral building phase. Wow. You see, where you had literally hundreds of thousands of highly trained, highly skilled craftspeople working on these things. You had, essentially, when you begin to look at the cathedral building phenomena, it required basically the mobilization of the whole of European society behind this enterprise, because you had to quarry huge amounts of stone, you had to transport these stones, you had to carve the stones. You look at the statuary, the stained glass, which is exceptional in its refractive properties that really have still not been mimicked to this day, the way the stained glass was able to refract light, so that it gives the appearance of not the light shining through the glass, but emanating from within the glass. And you could go on and on with this, the carpentry skill, the engineering skill, the astronomy that went into these structures. All of this combined basically shows up basically in a historical instant. And what's interesting is the scarcity of evidence showing what preceded this. Who organized this? Who raised the money? Who trained the craftsmen? You know, there are references to this in history, but really, you know, there's no explicit, detailed discussion where we can go and trace it and say, okay, this is how it happened, you know. But it's important to realize that this was a consequence of the expansion of wealth in European society that was able to allow this to happen.
And that's as a consequence of the warmth, the warmth of the earth.
And what we see is that the cathedral building era comes to a sudden termination in the early 1300s. And if you go and you travel around the cathedrals, you'll find that there's, in many cases, you know, the records suggest that it's almost as if in the middle of their work, the workmen laid down their tools and left in some cases. This is why there were so many cathedrals of the great ones that weren't finished, okay? But what you see is that exactly concurring with the cessation of cathedral building, within a few decades anyway, was the onset of the Little Ice Age and the return of the cold. In this first phase of the Little Ice Age, again, brought about agricultural collapses, it brought about famine, and then you had the Black Plague that showed up, I think, around, 1330, 1340, right in there. Again, decimated the civilization of Europe. Wow. So you can see, I mean, if we look at the historical record, what we see is the times of global warming have actually been times of advancement in civilization. Now, of course, that would have its limit. I mean, we could get to, you know, at some point where we would get too warm.
Right, of course.
But so far what we've seen, we're at this point well within the range of natural variability.